scientific research and discovery in respect, as we should, we must also be alert to the equal and opposite danger that public policy should itself become the captive of a scientific, technological elite.
We've signed a climate convention on the importance of economic instruments and free markets. Were included in this mammoth Agenda 21 document and the Rio Declaration. Now, let me be clear on one fundamental point. The United States fully intends to be the world's preeminent leader in protecting the global environment.
Coming up, Technocracy News. Welcome, my friends, to Technocracy News and Trends. My name is Patrick Wood. I'm the editor-in-chief of Technocracy News and Trends. And welcome to all the listeners around the world. Today, we're going to be headed towards a major story that was just posted on Technocracy News and Trends called Opportunity Zones, a technocratic deception to plunder America. But first, two other stories that are very significant. The first one is about Ed Snowden. You remember Ed Snowden was a whistleblower that blew the whistle on the NSA several years ago. He's been voluntarily living in exile in Russia, and he recently gave a speech at Dalhousie University in Halifax, Nova Scotia. He live-streamed it from Moscow because he doesn't dare set foot outside of Russia, lest he be arrested and put in jail for the rest of his life. Snowden's revelations, however, are significant. And the article states, NSA whistleblower Edward Snowden said Thursday that people in systems of power have exploited the human desire to connect in order to create systems of mass surveillance. He says, "We don't sign up for this," he added, dismissing the notion that people know exactly what they're getting into with social media platforms like Facebook. How many of you who have a Facebook account actually read the terms of service? Snowden asked. Everything has hundreds and hundreds of pages of legal jargon that we're not qualified to read and assess, and yet they're considered to be binding upon us. He continues, it is through this sort of unholy connection of technology and a sort of unusual interpretation of contract law, he continued, that these institutions have been able to transform this greatest virtue of humanity, which is the desire to interact and connect and to cooperate and to share, to transform all of that into a weakness. He says, maybe you've heard about it. This is mass surveillance. Well, we knew that, of course, but hearing it come from somebody like Ed Snowden puts an interesting twist on it. The second little tidbit of news is titled Bilderberg 2019, Is Eric Schmidt the New Henry Kissinger? I hadn't considered this thought before until I read the article that appeared in Newsweek magazine. Well, it's not a magazine as much as it is just an online blog now. But Newsweek, the publication, has a long history of being connected with the Trilateral Commission going way back into the 1970s. The magazine was sold to the Daily Beast, I believe it was 2010, and has continued on publication. This is also the magazine where Trilateral Commission member Fareed Zakaria wrote for several years until he was disgraced for plagiarism, rather blatant plagiarism, by the way. And so this article is interesting because at the very bottom of it is talking about the Bilderberg conference in Europe taking place right now and invited leaders of the world, which features a number of Silicon Valley people. At the very end of this article, a paragraph states something very interesting. The article was written, by the way, by one Charlie Skelton, and he's noted to be a United Kingdom-based writer and journalist. But the next to last paragraph in this article reveals this, quote, the two figures at Bilderberg who seem to have an aura of influence about them are Schmidt and Thiel. That's Eric Schmidt, the former CEO of Google and chairman of Alphabet, the parent company, and Peter Thiel, who was a co-founder of PayPal, a very well-to-do billionaire. It continues, over the years, Schmidt has been gently aligning himself as the heir to Kissinger, that's Henry Kissinger, and has populated recent conferences with Google executives. The libertarian Thiel has already engineered his lieutenant, Alex Karp, onto the steering committee. Well, this is a revelation that could have interesting ramifications because Kissinger was one of the original members of the Trilateral Commission, and his motto over the years was not do no evil, as once upon a time Google's was. And now that Eric Schmidt has risen up the ranks of the global elite, he also is a member of the Trilateral Commission. And so we find there's some special affinity between Kissinger and Eric Schmidt. Of course, Henry Kissinger now is well into his 90s. We don't know how much longer he can last, but Eric Schmidt is a younger man, and indeed who will fill Henry Kissinger's shoes in the end. This article suggests that it will be Eric Schmidt. Well, we'll see how that plays out. The big story today is opportunity zones, which I've titled A Technocrat Deception to Plunder America. This is a story that gives us an example of how people will work through the political system to achieve personal gain. You can read this story on Technocracy News and Trends. It's in the headline position today. Otherwise, search for it. How much more financial plundering can Americans endure before America is declared an outright oligarchy and the middle class declared dead? The Trump administration has aggressively teamed up with big tech billionaires to diversify their fortunes into underserved areas by allowing tax deferment on realized capital gains derived through liquidation of their core investments. This is a massive public-private partnership operation that could push as much as $6 trillion of unlocked capital into areas that would be turned upside down and worse, inundated with smart city technology designed to create a data extraction extravaganza for years to come. In short, this is an operation of big tech, for big tech, and by big tech, but President Trump has aided and abetted their efforts to manipulate government rules for their own self-interest. Undesired consequences will most certainly follow. Now, a little background to this. When President Trump signed the so-called Tax Cuts and Jobs Act of 2017, in December of 2017, few read or understood the small print authorizing the creation of opportunity zones. 1 year later, on December 12, 2018, President Trump created and signed an executive order titled Executive Order on Establishing the White House Opportunity and Revitalization Council, which created a highest-level committee that includes the very top leadership of the administration, the Secretaries of Treasury, Agriculture, Interior, Commerce, Labor, Health and Human Services, Transportation, Energy and Education, the administrators of the EPA and the Small Business Administration, the chairman of the Council of Economic Advisors, and even the Council of Environmental Quality, and a few other assorted bigwigs. The executive order instructs the council to, quote, work across agencies, close quote, to, quote, assess the actions each agency can take under existing authorities to prioritize or focus federal investments and programs on urban and economically distressed communities, including qualified opportunity zones. The object is to, quote, minimize all regulatory and administrative costs and burdens. Furthermore, the EO uses the phrase public and private investment no less than 6 times, and then stresses that the council must evaluate, quote, whether and how federal technical assistance, planning, financial tools, and implementation strategies can be coordinated across agencies to assist communities in addressing the economic problems, engaging in comprehensive planning, and advancing regional collaboration. Wow, that's a mouthful. Now, there are 3 immediate problems with this executive order. First, public-private partnerships have been developed over the years as a mainstay of the United Nations to finance sustainable development, and in particular, infrastructure that supports its sustainable development goals. Second, blanket cross-agency coordination can be a dangerous vehicle to create policies that represent no agency in particular and that no single agency would ever create by itself. Third, the term collaboration is a buzzword for collaborative governance that brings many types of stakeholders to the table to make binding decisions outside of traditional citizen representation or accountability. Furthermore, regional collaboration adds an additional dimension that promotes regionalism, which is patently unconstitutional. Article 4, Section 4 of the U.S. Constitution states, quote, "The United States shall guarantee to every state in this union a republican form of government. Regionalism is not a republican form of government, period." Opportunity zones were created in Section 13823 of the 131-page bill titled the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act of 2017. This was the act that supposedly would give tremendous tax breaks to individuals throughout our country. It was one of the mainstay planks of candidate Trump's presidential campaign, that is to give tax relief to Americans across the board. The summary of this tax act says this about opportunity zones. This is a direct quote from the publication. This section authorizes the designation of opportunity zones in low-income communities and provides various tax incentives for investments in these zones. Taxpayers may temporarily defer the recognition of capital gains that are invested in opportunity zones. Investments in opportunity zones or opportunity funds that are held for at least 5 years are eligible for capital gains tax reductions or exemptions, depending on how long the investment is held. The governor of each state is given authority, by the way, to define the opportunity zones within their state boundaries, which are then submitted to the Department of Treasury for automatic certification. The entire program, by and large, is self-certified. Zones are supposed to be low-income or under-advantaged or underserved communities, but several governors have stretched the definition, no surprise there, to include prime development areas as well. Thus far, over 8,700 of these zones have been established nationwide. It is noteworthy that one survey of state opportunity zone designation procedures revealed that less than 10% of states published their draft selections for public comment, and only 1/4 of the states formed a citizen advisory panel. The implication of this is the public has been largely left in the dark. The IRS issued its first set of rules in early 2018 with little fanfare or public interest. However, when the second set of rules were released in October of 2018, the barn doors were thrown open and the free-for-all began. The New Orleans Advocate noted on May 19, just recently, that, quote, "It's like the Wild West out there now." The article went on to say, quote, "It's not only the last-minute rule setting that has given the Opportunity Zone scheme a sense of anarchy. Literally anyone can set up a qualifying OZ fund, and there's no formal way yet for the government to track them and determine if they're directing investment to truly deprived areas as intended." That's right. It's like the Wild West in a state of anarchy. Well, the brains and lobbying effort behind the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act of 2017 is now discovered to be the Economic Innovation Group, or EIG, which by its own admission was the original creator of the Opportunity Zone concept in a 2015 paper titled "Unlocking Private Capital to Facilitate Economic Growth in Distressed Areas." There's a link to that article on Technocracy News and Trends. EIG boasts that, quote, "The idea has since been championed by a wide-ranging coalition of investors, entrepreneurs, community developers, economists, and other stakeholders." Subsequently to that report, Senator Cory Booker, Mr. Green New Deal himself, Democrat from New Jersey, and Senator Tim Scott, Republican from South Carolina, introduced Senate Bill S.293, called the Investing in Opportunity Act, into the 115th Congress on February 2nd, 2017. Matching legislation was introduced simultaneously in the House by Representative Patrick Tiberi, Republican, Ohio. While both bills were stuck in committee, the key provisions were slipped into the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act of 2017, which was passed and then signed into law by President Trump. Well, such a skillful, persistent, and successful lobbyist effort begs the question, who are these people anyway? Well, I'm glad you asked. The founder and executive chairman of EIG is Sean Parker, a well-known black hat hacker in his youth who co-founded Napster at age 18 to illegally share copyrighted music for free without authorization from the creators. At age 25, catch this, Parker joined Mark Zuckerberg in 2004 when Facebook was only 5 months old. He became the first president shortly thereafter, and Parker is credited as being the one who convinced Mark Zuckerberg that Facebook could one day be something really big. Forbes magazine today lists Parker as a venture capital investor and philanthropist. He is a multi-billionaire. Other members of EIG's founder circle include the general counsel of Facebook from 2008 to 2013, the founder of SV Angel, the founder and chairman of Quicken Loans, the number 23 out of 100 top tech investors on Forbes' 2015 Midas list, private and public sector entrepreneur and investor, who happens to be a board member of the Sarah Club Foundation, and a former investment banker at Lehman Brothers, who is also a leading venture capitalist specializing in high-tech startups. Well, in short, every one of these people are key players in the big tech venture capital world, especially on the West Coast, every single one. Furthermore, they have close connections with some of the top economists who are listed on their economic advisory board. The EIG Policy Council generally follows the same lines as the Founder Circle, but for this discussion, it has one noteworthy member, Chris Camacho of Phoenix, Arizona. Camacho is president and CEO of the Greater Phoenix Economic Council, which he has used to spearhead a public-private partnership here in the Phoenix area called Smart Region Initiative, or SRI. This is a three-way collaboration between Arizona State University, GPEC, and the managing partner, Arizona Institute for Digital Progress. Camacho is a hard-nosed business development expert and unequaled promoter of unconstitutional regionalism. One Phoenix Journal reported Camacho as saying, quote, "No one market across the country has unified multiple jurisdictions. There's been strategies to do smart cities in various places, but we're talking about how do you connect the entire region," close quote. Indeed, the Smart Region Initiative is being billed as the very first national attempt to create a regional authority to implement uniform smart city technology across, in our case, in Phoenix, Arizona, 22 cities and 4.2 million people. National, even global eyes are watching to see what will happen in the Valley of the Sun, and if this regionalism takeover is successful here, it will be used as a model for similar public-private partnerships all across America. While I intend to thoroughly cover the Smart Region Initiative movement in a separate report, it is important to see the potential connection between opportunity zones and smart region initiatives. Both are full of venture capitalists specializing in big tech initiatives like the Internet of Things, smart city surveillance technology, and most importantly, data, which many are calling the new oil of the 21st century. Both are new, riddled with public-private partnerships, and both promote unconstitutional practices. For the most part, every Opportunity Zone fund will typically have a managing partner that makes all decisions for investment structuring and accounting. Investors will simply pick a fund or a fund manager in which to invest, and you might ask, who are these fund managers? One needs to look no further than EIG's Opportunity Zones Coalition page to get the idea. This page lists 49 such would-be managers with names like Reinvestment Fund, Newark Venture Partners, KeyBank, Institute for Portfolio Alternatives, Fund for Our Economic Future, etc. And some of these would-be managers will end up with billions and billions of dollars under their direct management. Now, a case study on how this possibly could work out is found in Erie, Pennsylvania. On March 4, 2019, Government Technology, the magazine, reported that Erie, Pennsylvania, wants to overlay security tech onto its smart city. And the article states, listen carefully, 8 opportunity zones throughout the city could soon see new smart city technology equipped with license plate reading cameras and facial recognition capabilities. Officials say the goal is to boost safety and spur investment. Additional security cameras, LED lighting, and free public Wi-Fi were introduced to downtown Erie in 2018 as part of a pilot program for what's known as Smart City Technology. Mayor Joe Schimber's administration and other local officials want to bring the same technology to local neighborhoods targeted for reinvestment under the Federal Opportunity Zone program. And then he concludes, it's kind of an aggressive goal, but let's get these areas done. And within the next 3 years, I'd like to see that technology throughout the entire city, the mayor said. Well, needless to say, Erie got the message of how opportunity zones could best serve its pressing need to get someone else to pay for its smart city makeover. And once a beachhead is established in a lower income area, which can hardly protest anything the city does, rolling out to the rest of the city will be a cakewalk. Furthermore, the early city partners, that is the tech providers and investors, will have their foot in the door and will be eager participants in the rollout to the rest of the area. But why would anyone be eager to pour money into low-income and underserved areas? There are 3 good reasons, in my view. First and foremost, the value of data collection is found in all living human beings, regardless of their socioeconomic status. Second, the early bird gets the worm for the rest of the data plundering operation in other parts of the city or region. Third, once embedded, the data stream continues to pump into the coffers of those who own the collection infrastructure. Yes, it's about data. It's time to face the dark reality of the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act of 2017. The promised tax cut for individuals was largely a myth. Conversely, tax cuts for the wealthy and corporations were ostentatious. A just-released report by the Congressional Research Service confirms this. Quote, the main consequence was that real tax rates for corporations fell by nearly half, while individual income taxes barely budged. This is how it summarized that concept in the report. Quote, from 2017 to 2018, the estimated average corporate tax rate fell from 23.4% to 12.1%, and individual income taxes as a percentage of personal income fell slightly from 9.6% to 9.2%, close quote. Thus, a Republican-led Congress betrayed the American people, and President Trump offered no rebuke to get it right. Instead, he eagerly signed the Jobs Act into law and subsequently created an executive order to ensure the streamlining of its provisions throughout all levels of government agencies. In other words, he pulled out all the stops to make sure that this would succeed. After realizing that the door was open for the rich to get richer with the Jobs Act, one can almost picture the resulting feeding frenzy of lobbyists to get their favorite loophole into the text. The Economic Innovation Group, successful as they were able to claw their way into the mix and then to ensconce opportunity zones on behalf of the super-rich big tech venture capital cronies. And I repeat the question again. How much more financial plundering can Americans endure before America is declared an outright oligarchy and the middle class declared dead? I encourage you to get a copy of this article from Technocracy News and Trends, print it out, share it with friends, pass it around. And I want to say, just in closing, this article is not presented as a way to discredit President Trump and some of the things he's doing. So don't take it that way. But on the other hand, boondoggles like this need to be exposed. The issue is not whether President Trump knew or didn't know. The issue is that the big tech industry is spreading its tentacles into communities across the nation and in a way that allows them to not pay any capital gains taxes while they reinvest their money. And in many cases, like in the case of Facebook, for instance, you can imagine that Sean Parker's shares, which caused him to become a billionaire, have absolutely no cost base to them. They're almost zero. But the value of Facebook stock is sky high. So if he were to sell, let's say, a good portion of his stock today, he would have a huge, huge capital gains tax to pay. Well, he doesn't want to pay it. And the rest of his buddies that are involved in the EIG, they don't want to pay their taxes either. They want a way to get around it. That's what this is all about, pure and simple. They can sell their low-cost investments, avoid capital gains tax almost indefinitely, and rediversify their investments into these low-income areas across the country. So far, there's 8,700 defined, and it's growing. The impact on cities individually that allow this money to come in will be to displace the poor people that live in those areas. At first thought, you'd think, well, what could be bad about investing money in distressed areas to create new factories, to create new housing, to create new opportunities for people? Well, here's the problem with that. Unchecked, anytime money is simply thrown into a poor community, the community gets poorer, not richer. This is a paradox, I realize, but it's true. The way to lift people out of poverty is not simply to throw money at them. That will displace people, increase the homeless population, and give us problems in areas that, well, we wish we didn't have. So money is just not simply the answer to helping people get out of poverty. Returning their civil rights to them would be a good start. Encouraging the use of private property would be a great start. Taking the mantle of full-time surveillance off of these people would be a great start. But big tech has exactly the other view. More likely than not, the communities that can least protest it will be completely blanketed with smart city technology, and they'll eventually end up living in a situation that will be a scientific dictatorship, a digital dictatorship. Well, food for thought. I'm Patrick Wood for Technocracy News and Trends. Catch you next time.